I did not hit her. I did not.
The CW Arrowverse shows were never good. I know, I'm coming hot out of the gate with that one. But if you know me, then this shouldn't come as a surprise. I mentioned in the past how I never really cared for the CW shows, and with the recent news that the CW network is up for sale, I figured I might as well make a video giving my thoughts on the Arrowverse, explaining why I never cared for them, and give some reasons for why they grew so popular, and then discuss the future of the shows and characters since the network is going up for sale. So sit back, relax, and let's get into it.
You're trash.
So like I mentioned in my recent review of Season 1 of Superman and Lois, I never liked the Arrowverse shows even when they were considered good. And generally the first 2 seasons of Arrow and the first 2 seasons of The Flash are when the fans would consider it at its best. And at that point in time, I still wasn't into it. Now I watched this era of Arrowverse as much as I could. I watched Season 1 of Arrow, couldn't finish Season 2, and I stopped watching The Flash before the end of Season 1. And then every so often I would try to jump back into it, but I could never get hooked. I have a friend who was obsessed with the Arrowverse during this time period, and whenever we would hang out, he would either show me clips from the show, or he'd pull up Netflix and we'd watch a few episodes. This was his attempt to get me to like the show as much as him. So believe me, I tried several times to get into it. So let me explain why I never found these shows that good. For starters, I always found them to be cheap looking. Season 1 and 2 of Arrow doesn't look too bad, but The Flash never looked that good. Since Barry is a speedster, they have to rely on CGI and special effects to really show off what he and the other superpowered beings in the show can do, and it just never looked that good. It has gotten worse with time. But besides that, I always thought the outfits looked cheap and goofy as hell. And these fight scenes, oh man, these fight scenes. Arrow wasn't too bad. Since Oliver doesn't have powers, they didn't have to use many special effects, and instead just focus on the fight choreography, and they were pretty hit or miss. The Flash, on the other hand, yeah, it looks pretty goofy, not gonna lie. I can forgive some spotty CGI here and there, but this shit's on a whole other level. And I'm still talking about the first few seasons. Recently, the quality has fallen through the fucking floor in this department. So I found the production value to look cheap, goofy, and at times, laughable. But you know what? I know some people can look past that, and it won't take them out of the experience. And it's the story and characters that keep them hooked and engaged. And this is where my next biggest issue comes in, the filler. I think Arrow started off pretty decent, but as the show went on, you realize that it devolves into subplot filler that basically feels like it's there to pad out the runtime. And that's a common issue with all these shows, really. They will usually have a pretty decent start for a few episodes, but then starts to have some sort of romantic on-again, off-again subplot, or a villain of the week series of episodes. You know the ones, where a villain or a group of villains will cause issues for a few episodes before finally getting dealt with, and then they are promptly replaced with another random villain. The Flash is the worst with this. They largely had no impact on the overall narrative, and felt like they were included just to pad out the season, which leads me to the amount of episodes. Simply put, there's too many, and I felt there always have been. Seasons 1 through 6 of Arrow is 23 episodes, with 22 in Season 7 and 10 for the final season. With the outlier being the final season, that's over 20 episodes, 45 minutes long each. That's insane. Look at any of the CW Arrowverse shows and you'll see that they all have a very high episode count, with 16 to 18 actually being on the lower end for an average season. And this is the reason why these shows have so much filler. The seasons are bloated. The Flash, same issue. 23 episodes until lowering it down to 19 and 18 in the last few seasons, which is still too damn many. Can they really come up with a good gripping narrative that can last nearly 1,000 hours? The answer is no. I understand that in a show there might be an episode or two that isn't as important to the overall narrative of that season, but that's mostly what these shows are to me. Useless episodes focused on subplots and characters that I don't care about or find interesting. It's almost the opposite of what most shows do. Like I said, some shows will have 1 or 2 episodes that aren't as impactful to the overall story of that season. With the CW shows, it's almost the opposite, to where most of it's useless filler, with only a handful of episodes actually pushing forward the main narrative or conflict. And finally, the last major complaint is the quality of the writing. It sucks. Yeah, no surprise. I think Season 1 of Arrow and even Season 1 of The Flash to some extent isn't the worst. I think they do establish Oliver and Barry as pretty good leads, but then the issues came about when they started introducing side characters. Lots and lots of side characters. And before you know it, each hero has a whole ass team of either forgettable or annoying ass characters with them. But what's even worse is, as the shows went on, they started twisting and changing how characters would normally act just to have conflict that episode. It's like they would set up a character, establish the character, so you actually understand who the character is, but then a couple episodes later they would just make the character do something that you know they wouldn't do, just for the sake of having a conflict for the next couple episodes. The characters really started feeling really inconsistent with the way they act, and the melodrama just got worse and worse. There's a channel called Nerdy Before It Was Cool, and he mentioned this in his video he did about the CW. He said because of all this melodrama, that it started to feel like a soap opera. A superhero soap opera. And it's probably the best way I've heard someone put it. Also, the writers have to balance these big cast of characters, and they don't really do a good job at it. It's funny because they have so many characters that they'll actually dedicate whole episodes to 2 or 3 of them, and the main character, be it Barry, Oliver, or whoever, will start to feel like a side character in their own show. It's kind of amazing that they can do that. So those are the reasons why I never cared for the Arrowverse shows. I know I'm not saying anything groundbreaking or new. There are hundreds of videos online of people saying the same thing I'm saying, but going into more detail about these shows. I guess the only difference is that I just felt these shows have always been like this, but have gotten worse over time. Now that I told you why I never liked them, I want to discuss some of the reasons why I think these shows really got popular as they did, and how they were able to garner such a loyal fanbase. The first and most obvious one is that live-action superhero TV shows weren't as commonplace as they are today. Before the Arrowverse was a thing, how many successful, popular comic book shows were there in the early 2000s? What, Smallville? All the other ones I can think of all got canceled in like the first season, like that Blade TV series, or that Birds of Prey show. So really thinking about it, before Arrow premiered in 2012, there really wasn't much competition in the live-action TV superhero space, which I think made it easier for these shows to gather a following. So Arrow comes along and has a fairly decent balance of action, story, and writing, and fans are drawn to it not only because there wasn't much competition, but it did have a pretty decent quality in the beginning. I mean, I still don't think it was that good, but when comparing to all those canceled early 2000s superhero shows, it's much better. Now, I asked a friend of mine why he enjoyed the Arrowverse shows, because he was one of the few people I knew that actively watched them for years, and this is what he told me. I started watching and liking it because it was some of my favorite heroes of DC, which I love, and I liked seeing them being used finally, and seeing them on screen was nice. The only reason I stopped watching was I just kind of ran out of time to sit down and watch them. Basically, it was a means which I could see some of my favorite heroes and villains appear on the screen. And this is the other reason I've seen people watch it. These heroes and villains don't have much else going on, at least in the live action sense. So this show gave them something related to their favorite characters. Now, even though I titled this video, "The CW Arrowverse shows were never good," that is more of a hyperbolic title, because I can admit that in the beginning, it was decent in some aspects, especially compared to its competition of other superhero live action TV shows. And I could see why people would enjoy watching it, at least in the beginning, back in 2012 to 2014. Can't really say that for the last 5 or 6 years though. So unsurprisingly, the Arrowverse has been in decline for years, with more shows added to their shared universe, as well as crossover events. The quality quickly dipped, and what remained were still bloated seasons with even worse writing, melodrama storylines, overstuffed cast, and even lower production value. It was announced recently that the CW network might be going up for sale soon. Basically, Warner Brothers and CBS had their own channels, called the UPN and WB, but they merged the two networks and made the CW, and they funded programs basically 50-50. And it was revealed recently that the network has not been profitable since its conception in 2006, and so it could be looking for a buyer soon. And from what I gather, this is basically how it's going to work. Whoever comes in and buys the network will still produce the shows and finish out whatever contracts were set in place beforehand. And then once those contracts are fulfilled, they can choose to either continue the show or cancel it. Now, personally, here's what I think they should do. So there isn't a buyer yet, and all the shows are still going on as planned. I think they should focus on ending their DC shows over the next few years. And then once they're all over and the network is officially sold off, they should move and reboot several of these characters over on HBO Max with new shows, with bigger budgets, less episodes, and a tighter, more focused narrative. The viewership for these shows are at all-time low, so I think wrapping it up in its current state and taking time to reevaluate the characters and giving them a new life somewhere else is the best option. I'm talking about a clean slate. Except for Superman and Lois. They should move that to HBO Max in its current state. No need to reboot that one, it's good. To end this video off, I want to showcase the comments on a post I made saying the CW Arrowverse shows were never good. And I got some very mixed responses. Some agreed, some disagreed, some said it was good until a certain point. Overall, it was very interesting seeing what everyone thought. I posted that mainly just to get everyone arguing, because I think it's funny, but I was really curious on where everyone stood. So now I want you to go ahead, leave a comment, let me know what you think about the CW Arrowverse shows. Do you share the same mindset as me, thinking they were never actually that good? Or were you a fan for a while but then fell off? Or hell, are you still a fan currently right now and still actively watch it? Leave a comment and let me know. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, go and drop a like on it. Thanks for watching.
There's nowhere to run!
Smile!